Welcome back to The Discoverers. This is Chapter 73, To Wake the Dead. A full century passed before Winckelmann found his Vespucci to show and tell the world what had really been discovered. Although Heinrich Schliemann, 1822 to 1890, too rose from poverty to celebrity, in almost every other way, he was Winckelmann's opposite. Schliemann personally financed all his exploits. He was his own patron. He imported into archaeology the enterprise and love of action that had made him his fortune in commerce. For him, exploring the past became an athletic feat and an adventure in diplomacy to feed a newly news-hungry age. And his love of a beautiful woman helped keep the public spotlight on his digging. Son of a poor Protestant minister in a village in North Germany, Heinrich Schliemann's natural disposition for the mysterious and the marvelous was fired by his father's passion for ancient history. Quote, "He often told me with warm enthusiasm of the tragic fate of Herculaneum and Pompeii, and seemed to consider him the luckiest of men who had the means and the time to visit the excavations which were going on there. He also related to me with admiration the great deeds of the Homeric heroes and the events of the Trojan War, always finding in me a warm defender of the Trojan cause. With great grief, I heard from him that Troy had been so completely destroyed that it had disappeared without leaving any traces of its existence. My joy may be imagined, therefore, when, being nearly 8 years old, I received from him in 1829, as a Christmas gift, Dr. Georg Ludwig Gerard's Universal History, with an engraving representing Troy in flames, with its huge walls and the Scaean gate from which Aeneas is escaping, carrying his father Anchises on his back and holding his son Ascanius by the hand. And I cried out, 'Father, you were mistaken. Gerard must have seen Troy. Otherwise he could not have represented it here.' 'My son,' he replied, 'that is merely a fanciful picture.' But to my question, whether ancient Troy had such huge walls as those depicted in the book, he answered in the affirmative. 'Father,' retorted I, 'if such walls once existed, they cannot possibly have been completely destroyed. Vast ruins of them must still remain, but they are hidden away beneath the dust of ages.' He maintained the contrary, while I remained firm in my opinion, and at last we both agreed that I should one day excavate Troy." End of quote. His mother died when he was 9. Since his father's poverty left him little hope of going to the university, he dropped out of the gymnasium, where he might have pursued his classical interests, and instead went to the vocational Realschule. At 14, Schliemann was apprenticed to a grocer and spent 5 years working from 5 in the morning till 11 at night, grinding potatoes for the whiskey still, packaging herring, sugar, oil, and candles. He escaped by becoming a cabin boy on a ship bound for Venezuela. When the ship was wrecked in the North Sea, he found a post as messenger and later bookkeeper for a trading firm in Amsterdam. Through these drab years, Heinrich never lost his romantic ambition. Determined someday to unearth the real Troy, every spare moment, even as he ran errands or waited in line at the post office, he improved himself by reading. By his own system, he acquired a score of languages, never missing an opportunity to learn or to practice what he learned. Quote, "This method consists in reading a great deal aloud without making a translation, devoting 1 hour every day to writing essays upon subjects that interest one, correcting these under a teacher's supervision, learning them by heart, and repeating in the next lesson what was corrected on the previous day." End of quote. Within 6 months, he reports, he had acquired, quote, "a thorough knowledge of the English language," as part of the process of having committed to memory the whole of Goldsmith's Vicar of Wakefield and Sir Walter Scott's Ivanhoe. In only 6 weeks devoted to each, he learned to write and to speak fluently French, Dutch, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, and some others. When he traveled through the Middle East, he acquired a practical knowledge of Arabic. The spoken word interested him most. He never forgot the cadence of spoken Greek, which he first heard when a drunken miller, a dropout from the gymnasium, came into the grocery store where Schliemann was working and melodiously recited lines from Homer. But he waited till middle life to turn to his beloved Greek. Quote, great as was my wish to learn Greek, I did not venture upon its study till I had acquired a moderate fortune, for I was afraid that this language would exercise too great a fascination upon me and estrange me from my commercial business. End of quote. Schliemann followed an arduous and devious road to fortune. When he was a young man in Amsterdam, Russian merchants were coming there for the indigo auctions. Except for the Russian vice consul, Heinrich found no one in Amsterdam who knew Russian, and when the vice consul refused to be his teacher, he employed his usual system in a crash program to teach himself. He hired an old Dutchman to be his audience as he declaimed Russian 2 hours each evening. When the tenants of his boarding house complained, Heinrich did not change his system, but he had to change lodgings twice before he was satisfied with his fluency in the language. The trading firm where he worked had dealings in St. Petersburg and sent him there as their agent. In St. Petersburg, trading in indigo, dyewoods, and war materials like saltpeter, brimstone, and lead, he soon, to his own surprise, made a fortune. Then he no longer feared the glorious distraction of the classical language. He spent 6 weeks learning modern Greek, and in another 3 months plunged into the ancient authors. After the Crimean War, he traveled the world pursuing his historical interests. His childhood love was a playmate, Minna Meinke, who had shared his fantasy of pursuing the quest for Troy. And when he was established in business, he went in search of her. He did find Minna Meinke, but alas, she was already married. In 1852, he made the mistake of marrying a Russian beauty who wanted only his money. She refused even to share his home, much less his archaeological interests. Meanwhile, having become an American citizen by the accident that he was traveling in California when it became a state of the Union, he went to Indiana to benefit from its loose divorce laws and there divested himself of his Russian wife. Determined not to make the same mistake again, he asked an old friend, his Greek teacher, who had since become the Archbishop of Athens, to find him a suitable young Greek wife. The archbishop obliged by suggesting his relative, Sophia Ingastromenos, a bright and beautiful 17-year-old schoolgirl. In Athens, before he decided to marry Sophia, Schliemann visited her classroom incognito to hear how she recited Homer. Her mellifluous Greek brought tears to his eyes and clinched his determination to marry her. The polylingual Heinrich, at 47, made Sophia his lifelong student. At their marriage, she knew only ancient and modern Greek, but he promised that she would learn 4 more languages in the next 2 years. He trudged her about the capitals of Europe and the Near East, expounding history and archaeology, testing her knowledge, pressing her not to lag behind. After an interval of headaches, nausea, and fevers, she survived to become his colleague when he finally began his digging at Hissarlik in 1871. She went into the archaeological trenches, something astonishing at the time for a woman, and managed to direct a crew of Turkish workmen in the excavations. Schliemann, unlike Winckelmann, believed his vocation to be digging. His proper province was not words, but things. But the work he loved required that he supervise laborers who spoke exotic languages, and his gift of tongues, which helped him manage his digs, enabled him to convert doubters and advertise his finds. And this concludes part 1 of chapter 73.